All right, welcome to this live stream as I hang out in this room by myself. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to make sure that people can join, and I really have a slight idea of how these things actually show up in somebody's stream, but it's kind of still a mystery to me. So I don't know if everybody kind of has to be on my channel to actually see this. So that's fine. And apparently, there's a special feature that you can have activated on your stream, which turns on only after you get 10,000 subscribers. So my goal for the next 2 months, okay, let's just make it a challenge. Next month, 30 days, is to raise my subscriber level to 10,000 people who are passionate about learning and scenario design, and then get that special feature, which I believe has to do with closed captioning, and it allows for closed captioning in real time. Now, I don't know if you've ever actually used Zoom, which is a video conferencing software. But what Zoom allows, if you have a super duper business account with 10 seats, is that it allows to have dynamic closed captioning, which is cool. I don't know how good it is lately. I've seen it where if somebody's using words that are not intuitive, it will make up other words. And then you're like, why is this in here? Why is this in the script? So you have to go and re-listen to it. Or, as it's doing it dynamically as you're speaking, apparently these things are getting better. However, I don't know if you've checked out any of the resources on YouTube lately, but their transcription service, that's like the CC, that's already built in, and it takes a little while for it to actually, after you post a video, for it to catch up. It has been actually absolutely amazing quality. So I can't believe that's actual machine doing that. And then you can go in and make any changes, capitalize your name. And, I have a really ridiculous long last name. So then you think about the fact that it actually picks it up. So I don't know where it's doing that from, but maybe it's picking it up from my channel, but it's working really well. So I think with the 10,000 subscribers, that actually allows you to do dynamic closed captioning, which I think is huge, because I just ran another live on Facebook just 34 minutes ago. And one of the things that I talked about there is just because this morning I had a conversation with a client who's doing some relaunching and revision to their current training. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people focus on when they have, and a lot of organizations that are pretty established, sorry about this. Oh, I just had a piece of dirt fly in my eye. A lot of organizations that are pretty established have these giant repositories of awesome training already. And it's kind of weird because I think there's this hype going on that everything has to be new and sexy and scalable, and you should be able to look at something on a desktop and it should look amazing on mobile. And that's great. That's one way of optimizing the learning experience. However, if your learning is not okay, so just let me back up a little bit. So at the current organization, let's say that you're working at, there's already people who are rock stars, amazing performers. They are I call them the elite. And if you really think about the distribution curve, which is the bell curve, right? If you think about it, most employees, actually all organizations and all the employees at an organization fall into that bell curve, right? So there's if you have this is a straight line, and then you have that bell. Let me just draw this because it'll be faster. Okay. Okay. All right. So what happens is, at an organization, employees are distributed on a bell curve. And this bell curve, the upside down bell curve, is, no, this would be the upside down bell curve. This is the bell curve. And what happens is the employees are distributed this way. And let's say this line identifies the number of employees. And then this is their experience level, let's say. Or this is their experience, this is their experience level, and this is the volume of employees. So here, let's say, and this would be, so it would be low performers, moderate performers, and elite. Let's say it's like this. So low performers, moderate performers, and elite performers. Now, if you follow the principle of the Pareto principle, which says that 20% of your results, or 80% of your results come from 20% of your people, the elite actually produces 80% of your results for the company. That's how much impact they have. And also, if you look at the low performers, they're usually, this is the 20% that produces the most issues and low production. And then there's people in the middle who are kind of, they're just kind of, they're not on the low performance end, but you're actually, this is where you, this is where the bulk of people fall in. So then there's these elites. The elites are the 20%. Now, the problem with most learning when you're designing it is, this is what I find, we're always designing for these people right here. And we're trying to get the low entry level, don't really get it, are not necessarily interested in upskilling. We're trying to get these people motivated to move into this next piece here. And that's actually a huge struggle and probably a bad way to approach your training, because if you can get this chunk, which is the biggest chunk of your people, to move up to this level, then you're maximizing on that 80% that's actually being moved or that's actually being upskilled. So what you want to do is, this is the Jack Welch way. And if you don't know who Jack Welch is, you should look him up. He's an amazing human being, and also basically taught me this idea, and I learned it from him, is that every single year you should get rid of the top or the bottom 10% of the employees, because these guys bring the organization down. So you don't build your learning for these guys. And one of my other mentors said, you don't send ducks to eagle school. And he said that because what happens is these are all the ducks, let's say, and we're trying to send them to eagle school, and that doesn't work. When you have the eagles help you design the training, there's a mindset that they're trying to achieve. You want to be showing that to not only other eagles, right, or people who are really close to this, but also people who are right here in this middle, not to these people here, because to get them from here to here will be more of a challenge. You want to focus on the people who are really close to here already, and they just need that extra perspective jump to get them going. And this is actually a great, this example was shared in a recent book that I talked about as well. Where's my beautiful book? Oh, here it is. The 4 disciplines of execution. And in here, they have this awesome diagram. I got to show you this diagram. Where are you? Should have marked it. Should have marked it. Now there's all this suspense. Will she find that breakdown? And I will, because I always do, because it is in here. And there's no time pressure here. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So they talk about, you know how I broke down the learners into low, moderate, and elite performance. So they break down, they have a different approach, because what they're trying to do here in this book is to try to show you how to run projects and how to achieve big goals, even when you have the whirlwind of basically everyday life and everyday emergencies that come up in business still go on. So how do you help people focus on the important stuff, even though everything else is still coming in as an emergency? So one of the things they said is that when you have, when you pitch an idea to your workforce, there's going to be, the breakdown is going to be resistors, potentials, and models. I don't know if you can see that. So we've got the resistors, potentials, and models. See how that's basically also a bell curve, right? And the distribution is 20, 60/20. So one of the things that they suggested that you do is what you're trying to do is you're trying to move everybody at your organization from here, from this kind of breakdown where most of the people are the resistors, no, the potentials, sorry, to this, where you moved the potentials over to the models and the resistors still stay, but you kind of got to get rid of them. So that big bulge in the middle, that's where you need to focus, because that's where your biggest numbers are, and that's who you're trying to move over. I think a lot of times the reason we get so discouraged with our learning, with our initiatives, is because we always go to the resistors. We're like, oh, let's convince the people who are really against it to try and really sway them over. No, don't worry about them, because they're almost too far gone for your efforts to gain momentum. So what happens is, this is the same thing that happens with any kind of uptake in technology, right? There's like the early adopters, the late adopters, and then there's the people who like wait for it to be automatically moved into their home because they don't want to take any action, right? The people who were using candles until they were forced to have an electrical switch. Who knows? Anyways, but what you want to do is you want to move people to actually gain momentum. You don't want to go where it's very hard. You want to go you want to go into the areas where people are slightly receptive and also just need a little bit of a push or a mindset shift to actually move into the next level. And a lot of times I notice this, because I've been there myself. When you're hungry for the next level, sometimes what you don't realize is, like, you might be hitting a wall, right? And you've hit this wall for a while. You're like, things aren't making sense. You've hit a plateau professionally or psychologically. You're just like, I can't get through. And so what happens is you need some kind of an experience, somebody to bring like their hand over from the other side and be like, hey, come here, let me show you this. And one of my mentors, he doesn't know he's my mentor. It's Mr. Jim Rohn. So Mr. Rohn said that, look him up. He's an amazing speaker, and he's gone. He's left us, moved into another realm of reality. But what he said is that we all have kind of like a perspective on things, and you're looking at the world through the perspective, and you see things and they look like that's the whole world, or that's all of the options available to you. And then what happens is somebody else can take you and be like, hey, look at it from my vantage point. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I never even considered that before. That's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm sold on your perspective, that I want it now, but now it's a different peephole. And not only does that allow me to look at the same situation or the same opportunity in a different way, but it brings to my mind the idea that there are more than one ways to look at this particular problem or to solve it. And so that's why I love scenarios, because a scenario is not necessarily a first-person experience. It doesn't need to be. A scenario can be you walking through the shoes of somebody else who has a completely different value, skill set, or reality, or emotional competence, all those other things. And now you're experiencing the world through their eyes. So it's easy for you to, one, have the distance, enough distance to actually observe them, be the outside observer and evaluate their choices and actions from a different perspective, compare them to your own. So because you need that distance to be able to make the shift. And also, what's beautiful is that scenarios allow you to experience consequences that would not be available to you unless you were that person. And the only reason you're able to experience those consequences is because you are an outside observer. Nobody else is going to tell you about those things from a different perspective in life. They might happen, but you might not recognize them as such. And it's not structured in the same way. Really, a scenario is designed to give you epiphanies, right? It's designed to give you aha moments. It's structured very carefully so that every single one of those options is in some way a learning moment and a challenge to your beliefs, a challenge to what you already think you know. And each one of them is tied to a consequence which you already think you know how it's going to turn out, but you don't always do that, right? So that's why I think this is great. So that kind of brings me back to that piece that I was talking about initially, which is when you're trying to get more engagement in the training that you already have in your big repository. The idea is not necessarily that you need to recreate all of that training. I mean, there definitely is a place for training to be updated regularly, reviewed by end users, gather feedback from them to see if that it is useful. But if you've already developed an elite workforce using those learning pieces, right, using that old school stuff, and it's worked and created this kind of beast out there that's like selling for you or being a super leader, then all you need to do is, instead of reworking this to be just crazy dynamic, is one, see if it speaks to the learner in the language that they understand. So update that, make sure the language is localized. That's huge. And then two, what you want to do is make sure that you're capturing that leadership elite experience, which now is basically augmented by all of those resources that you've had online. So they've taken that, they took all those courses initially, and then they took them and applied them in the field. And now they've become these rock stars. So what you want to do is capture their experiences, capture those perspectives, and then bring them back in to augment all of those other pieces of learning so that you could say, here's a situation which one day you will be a part of. Are you going to handle yourself? Or here's a situation that Judy is in when she goes out to the field every day. Now, this, based on Judy's experience and or lack of, this is the kinds of choices that she's making. You're going to help her because you think you're the expert. So let's see if you can help her make the best decision. And if you find that there's a gap, we've got something awesome for you to not only upskill yourself, but also fill that gap, or just augment what your skill set that you already have. We've recognized that's great, but the next level up, if you want to get to the elite, here it is. This is the resource. So that's why I think scenarios are just critical, because they don't have to be the point where somebody gets taught something. They just expose people to situations where they can perceive their gaps. And also what this does is it allows you to capture those elite experiences that are custom to your company and your culture and your specific context, in like whether you're retail or whether you do humanitarian aid or whether you do fundraising, whatever it is that you're doing. There's no repository out there as far as subscription repository that you'll be able to tap into as an organization that will fill all those needs, that will actually be able to explain that context. It's not possible. There's a lot of things that can be borrowed and used to augment your experiences, but that context of in-person experience in the specific situations that are relevant to only your company, you don't want them leaving when somebody retires or moves position, right? You want to capture that. And the more you capture that, the more of that almost a legacy that your company has and that your organization has, and the experiences that have made it what it is today, they're not lost. They're actually used to enhance the experience of the people coming up to that level. So yeah, am I exciting you enough with that? Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'm doing these, every day. So either on Facebook or on YouTube or both. And if you put your questions in the chat or a comment now underneath the video, I'll do my best to answer it during this chat. And I also bring in some discussions and some contentions that come up in the conversations that I have with my clients, because I think that a lot of them have they're very contextual. So I can put a lot of depth into why they're asking those questions and then bring that back to you. So maybe you can apply it in your own context as well, right? And it'll help you sell scenarios at your company, or actually just implement that more seamlessly into what you've already have. So you're not investing your time into things that aren't necessarily necessary. And if you want to work with me, then, all my links are on my site, or connect with me on LinkedIn so that you can see these updates in your stream every single day. Okay. Take care, friend, and I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and maybe I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.